Welcome back. Have you recovered from that report? It's rather heavy, isn't it? As the report illustrates, the Cultural Revolution was a traumatic experience for a whole generation. Schools and universities were shut down for years. Imagine being a student in China at that time. A whole generation was left without access to any higher education. As we shall see, the Cultural Revolution also had a massive impact on the evolution of the legal system. This brings us to our next topic, key elements of China's current legal system. First attempts at introducing modern Western-style legislation were made already in the last 2 decades of Imperial China, between 1890 and 1910. At that time, neighboring Japan had already emerged as a powerful modern state that had successfully adopted Western technology, Western industrial production, Western science, Western-style universities, and also modern legislation following Western models. The Japanese example impressed young Chinese intellectuals who became politically involved in reform and revolutionary movements with the vision of overcoming China's weakness, modernizing the country and catching up with Western powers. Many of these young intellectuals, including Sun Yat-sen, who was to become the leader of the Republican Revolution of 1911, went to study at Japanese universities where they learned about Western science and also about Western political and legal concepts. In the 1911 revolution, this class of intellectuals attempted to put their ideas into practice and turn China into a modern nation-state with a republican government system. This included introducing a modern legal system. Consequently, there was some experimenting with Western political and legal concepts at that time. However, as we have seen in the previous podcast, the Republic of China was never really successful. It quickly fell prey to local warlords and later to the turmoil of civil war, a situation that was further complicated by the constant interference of foreign powers. The Communist Revolution of 1949 brought a shift in focus. In the following years, the role model was the Soviet Union, which led to the introduction of a Soviet-style socialist legal system aimed at providing the framework for strict one-party rule and the socialist-planned economy. Yet with Mao Zedong's revolutionary campaigns, especially with the Cultural Revolution, the focus shifted again. During the Cultural Revolution, law was largely replaced by politics. The legal system was destroyed, lawmaking was interrupted, courts ceased to function, legal education was abolished, no laws, no courts, no law schools, nothing. That is how Mao Zedong left China when he died in 1976. When Deng Xiaoping took over in the late 1970s and started to introduce his economic reforms, a new legal system had to be built from scratch. Modern legislation was introduced step by step, with a strong focus on business-related areas of law, including the legal protection of foreign investment, contract law, corporate law, competition law, and the protection of intellectual property, patents, industrial design, copyright, trademarks. In these efforts at creating a completely new economic law framework, Germany provided considerable support by sending experts, promoting academic exchange, organizing and financing conferences, etc. As a result, much of modern Chinese legislation is heavily influenced by German models. In parallel to issuing legislation, the judiciary was restored. A court system was put in place. In addition, law schools were reopened. Legal education was reintroduced at universities. For example, at the Wuhan University School of Law, you can see on the picture, which is one of our partner universities. Wuhan is not only where recently the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, but also where one of China's leading faculties of law is located. Among the key elements of modern Chinese law, the public law framework is still based on socialist concepts of a strict one-party rule. The Communist Party of China still dominates the scene. While China has opened up its economy, the Communist Party continues to hold its grip on political power. It controls everything in politics. Accordingly, every state institution has a double leadership structure. This is also the case at universities, for example. On the one hand, there is the university management headed by the president of the university. But on the other hand, there is also always a party leader of the university. And this is similar in other state institutions as well. For example, in courts, which means that courts are not entirely independent from party interests. The modern economic law that has been introduced step by step since Deng Xiaoping started to open up China's economy is aimed at creating the legal certainty that is necessary to attract foreign investment and encourage private enterprise. The Chinese legislation in the field of economic law meets current international standards. And this is also the case for intellectual property law, for example. The People's Republic of China is a WTO member state. It is bound by the WTO regulations, including the TRIPS agreement, the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. And it has adapted its legislation on intellectual property to the standards defined in the TRIPS agreement. Product piracy issues that are still of rather frequent occurrence in China have less to do with legislation than with enforcement. Enforcement is what can be difficult depending on the case. This brings us to the next point. When restoring the judiciary after the Cultural Revolution, China has put in place a whole court system. Chinese courts are generally quite efficient. On the other hand, as we have seen, they are not completely independent. The Communist Party keeps an eye on the courts. Depending on the case, party interests can play a role in the decision-making of a court. Against this background, arbitration can be a good alternative. Arbitration clauses are frequent in contracts between companies from other countries and their Chinese business partners. I hope that this provides you a first basis for understanding the legal environment and the legal challenges of doing business in China. The remaining points in our program will be discussed in class. See you there.